Ever feel like you're constantly chasing approval, even though you swore you didn't care? From likes on social media to praise at work, we are always seeking that external validation. But what if there's more to happiness than the opinions of others? Validation isn't a flaw in your character. It's part of being human. From the moment you're born, your survival depends on being noticed, held, fed by someone outside yourself. Long before you could speak, your nervous system learned, I feel safe when I'm mirrored, I feel good when I'm approved. That early wiring doesn't just disappear when you grow up, it deepens. As children, we start molding ourselves around the smiles and frowns of the people we need most. Parents, teachers, peers, all become mirrors. If love came when you were quiet and obedient, you learned to mute your messiness. If you were praised for achievement, you started tying your worth to performance. Validation became not just a comfort, but a compass. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once wrote that the greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur so quietly, it's almost like it never happened. And that's the quiet tragedy of living only for validation. You don't notice the slipping away, not until you wake up in a version of yourself that's well-liked, but unfamiliar. Nowhere does this show up more painfully than in our romantic relationships. What looks like love is often just mutual validation. Two people, reflecting back the image the other wants to believe about themselves. You want to be desired, not necessarily for who you are, but for how that desire makes you feel worthy. You want to be chosen, not just out of love, but because being chosen says, you matter, you're enough. In this kind of dynamic, love becomes performance, and what starts as chemistry slowly morphs into codependency. You may begin to shapeshift for approval, agree when you disagree, stay silent when you want to speak, say yes when your body screams no, all in the hope of not being abandoned. The psychologist Carl Rogers described this as conditions of worth. We internalize the belief that we are lovable only under certain conditions. If we're attractive, agreeable, successful, or low maintenance enough. And so, even intimacy becomes a stage. What gets lost is authenticity. You become more invested in being loved than being known. You fear rocking the boat because disapproval feels like a threat to your very existence. But over time, something inside you begins to ache, not for more validation, but for a kind of peace that no amount of praise can buy. That's where boundaries come in, not as walls to keep love out, but as fences that protect your sense of self. Boundaries are how you say, I am more than how you see me. I am worthy, even when I'm not pleasing you. When you set boundaries, you risk losing validation, and that's terrifying, especially if your self-worth depends on someone else's approval. But it's also the only way to find out what kind of love survives without performance. Because real connection doesn't require you to edit yourself. It asks you to reveal yourself, even the messy parts, even the parts that might not get applause. Validation used to come from the tribe, the eyes of a few people who knew you deeply. Now, it comes from the crowd, or more accurately, the illusion of one. We live in a culture that rewards visibility, not integrity, and the more public our lives become, the more private our insecurities get. Social media didn't invent our craving for validation, but it did supercharge it by making it quantifiable. A like, a share, a comment, a blue check. These things now carry the emotional weight of approval, popularity, even self-worth. They're not just pixels. They're dopamine hits. They are little trophies telling you exist, you matter. But here's the problem. Your sense of self becomes tethered to what performs. You start curating a version of yourself that's designed to please, not just others, but algorithms. And slowly, you stop expressing. You start branding. You post what gets applause, not what's real. You develop a you for public consumption. Polished, clever, strategic. This performance might look like confidence, but it's often anxiety in disguise, an obsession with control, a fear of invisibility. Philosopher Alan Watts once said, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The more you chase an identity through performance, the more you become a stranger to your own aliveness. It's not just online either. This shows up in your career. Your resume becomes your personality. Your productivity becomes your value. In the workplace, validation is often confused with success, but a promotion doesn't mean you're seen, just that you're useful. The tragedy is that even when you achieve the image you were chasing, the look, the career, the partner, it still doesn't fill you. because it wasn't built on truth, it was built on survival. And so, you become haunted, not by failure, but by hollowness. You wonder why it still doesn't feel like enough, even though everyone says it should be. But how could it? How could something external resolve something internal? When your identity is built on validation, you live in fear of losing it. Every scroll becomes a silent comparison. Every silence feels like rejection. Every moment alone feels like proof that you're not important enough. And then comes resentment. You start resenting people who seem more adored, more followed, more affirmed. But beneath that bitterness is often envy, not just of their attention, but of their perceived confidence, their ease, their unbothered existence. But most people are faking it too. Most people are trapped in the same loop, performing for love, starving for authenticity. This isn't a call to abandon the world. You don't need to delete your accounts, quit your job, or reject recognition entirely. The real invitation is more radical than that. It's this: can you live in a world obsessed with validation without letting it own you? That begins when you start noticing what version of you shows up when nobody's clapping. Who are you when no one's watching, liking, or affirming your existence? Can you sit with the silence that follows when you don't perform? The ego hates this question. It feeds on identity, especially the kind that's admired. But the soul is quieter. It wants something deeper, not validation, but wholeness. And the price of that wholeness is discomfort. You'll disappoint people. You'll be misunderstood. You'll lose applause, but you'll gain something else, the experience of being with yourself, not as a brand, not as a role, but as a person, a real, breathing, feeling person. So how do you stop chasing validation without falling into isolation or indifference? Not by becoming invulnerable, not by pretending you don't care, but by learning to care differently. The real shift happens when you stop asking, "Do they like me?" and start asking, "Do I like this version of me?" Not the version who says the right thing, or wears the right mask, or fits the moment perfectly, but the version who feels honest, awake, present. That's how self-trust is built. Not in moments of success, but in the quiet after, when the applause fades, when the likes stop, when no one's watching, and you're still proud of how you showed up. It's not a rejection of connection. In fact, it's the beginning of real connection, because when you stop performing for validation, you create space for intimacy, the kind that can only grow when you're not hiding. This doesn't mean you'll never care about being seen again. Of course you will. You're human. We all want to be witnessed. What changes is why you want it. You stop needing others to complete your identity. You start inviting them into it, as it already exists. It's a quieter hunger, a softer presence, a way of saying, "This is me. I hope you see me. But if you don't, I won't disappear." Psychologist Carl Rogers once said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." That's the strange magic of letting go of validation. You become more fluid, not less. More open, not more rigid. You're no longer living to be approved of. You're living to be alive. But make no mistake, this path is hard. It's lonely at first. When you stop outsourcing your worth, you'll feel the withdrawal. You'll want to reach for the applause, the approval, the quick fix of affirmation. And when you don't, it might ache. But that ache is not emptiness. It's space. And space is where something honest begins to grow. Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's clarity. Maybe it's a quiet sense of self-respect that doesn't need to be explained. Whatever it is, it's yours. And once you've felt it, you'll begin to crave it more than you crave attention. That's the paradox. The less you need validation, the more authentic affirmation finds you. Because people are drawn to something most of us rarely see. Someone who isn't performing. Someone who is okay with being misunderstood. Someone who can be soft without being needy. Strong without being defensive. Someone who isn't trying to win love, but simply be love. This is how healing begins. Not by proving your worth, but by remembering it. And that's the truth behind our hunger for validation. At its root, it isn't just about praise or popularity. It's about the longing to be met, to be mirrored, to be seen accurately, not just admired, but known. But here's the secret. That longing only softens when you start doing for yourself what you've begged the world to do. See yourself, sit with yourself, approve of yourself, not because you're perfect, but because you're here, awake, a little messy, a little scared, but honest. And honesty is magnetic. So no, Maybe we'll never stop wanting to be seen, but we can stop being controlled by it. We can learn to seek something richer than validation. We can seek truth. And if we're lucky, we'll find others doing the same.